Hi everyone, how are you? My name is Veronica. Is it okay if we'll crack on and start now? As I said, my name is Veronica. I'm a dietitian working in cancer care up until recently in Dublin, and I've recently moved to the west, so living in Galway now. Is that better? Yeah, okay, there we go. I said my name is Veronica and I'm a dietitian working in cancer care. I've, up until recently, living in Dublin, recently moved to Galway. Today I'm here to speak to you about why eating well matters after a cancer diagnosis. We know the nutritional needs of cancer patients can change a lot from the stage of diagnosis, during treatment, and to the post-treatment phase, or for people with advanced cancer. So I want to break that down today. Oh, sorry guys, my screen isn't working. This screen down here for me. It's black, yeah. Sorry. I can't see my notes. So I can crack on anyways. So how I've broken down the talk today, it's quite a broad topic, and I could probably speak about it for 24 hours, but I won't. We have about 30 to 35 minutes today. I've broken it down into eating well at diagnosis and on treatment. We'll look at benefits to eating well, the barriers that people experience to eating well during treatment, and we'll look at practical tips for optimal nutrition. Then we'll look at eating well after treatment, so the post-treatment phase. We'll look at benefits and barriers to this as well, and then practical tips for nourishing your body. The main thing I want to do with the time frame that we have is be able to signpost you to good quality evidence-based advice. So that's what I'm really going to try and do throughout the talk today. You know, I know from meeting people in person and from a lot of evidence, it shows us that people often find it quite confusing where to find good quality information. You know, we hear different things from friends and family and from reading things online, and it can be quite difficult to discern where we get good quality advice. So why does eating well matter while on treatment? Well, we know the goal of nutrition during cancer treatment is not necessarily to treat the cancer itself, but to support a person to withstand their cancer treatment. Good nutrition at the time of diagnosis and during treatment is vital for a person to maintain their health, their strength, and good physical function, to keep you as well as possible during treatment. If we think, I like to think about the idea of training for a marathon. We would never sign up for a marathon without good quality advice around exercise and nutrition, but many people are faced into their cancer journeys and face very tough regimes without any advice around nutrition or physical activity. So it's great to have Lisa speaking later on today as well about physical activity, because both nutrition and physical activity go hand in hand. We know adequate nutrition helps a person maintain their body weight, their muscle mass, and their muscle strength during cancer treatment. This is important, as we know cancer outcomes are better when people are able to maintain their body weight and their muscle mass. People experience less symptoms during chemotherapy and radiotherapy when people are able to maintain their body weight and muscle mass as well. Symptoms include things like fatigue, pain, taste changes. We'll look at a whole list of them in a moment, but also, if people are able to avoid things like neutropenia, which is a low white blood cell count, have lower rates of infection, and manage symptoms better, they tend to have less treatment interruptions or dose reductions during chemotherapy. People also recover quicker after surgery, meaning they're fit for any subsequent treatments that they might need in a quicker time frame, which is positive. In general, people score higher rates of quality of life and are able to maintain their independence during treatment. Good nutrition ultimately impacts in terms of a person's response to anti-cancer therapy and the risk of mortality. So what we would encourage for all people really starting out in their cancer journey is to try and maintain their weight from the time of diagnosis right through the treatment journey. And this is regardless of your weight category, so meaning whether you're normal weight, overweight, or obese. We would really encourage all people to aim to maintain their weight and identify any weight loss with their medical team. So just looking at next, some of the barriers and touching on that idea of maintaining weight. We know it can be really challenging for people to do this. We know from studies dating back over the past 35 years, approximately 30 to 70% of cancer patients lose weight during treatment. This often depends on, I guess, the range. It's quite a large range, 30 to 70%, but this depends on the location of a person's cancer and also the stage of their cancer. And then thinking about muscle loss, the majority of cancer patients in a recent Irish study were found to lose muscle on treatment, so 52% have experienced muscle loss or what is termed as sarcopenia. Muscle loss and weight loss occur for a multitude of reasons. We know that the psychological impact of a cancer diagnosis can have a significant impact on a person's appetite. If people experience stress, anxiety, depression, this can hugely impact on a person's ability or on a person's appetite and subsequently their nutritional intake. We know cancer itself can cause a reduction in a person's appetite. And it can also impact in terms of muscle wasting due to physiological or hormonal changes in the body. People who have to fast for surgeries and procedures, this can impact in terms of nutritional intake, especially in a post-surgical period. If people are experiencing symptoms or feeling unwell after surgery, studies show that it can significantly impact in terms of calorie and protein intake. And many studies show us that many people decrease their physical activity from the time of diagnosis right through the cancer journey and even for a couple of years after treatment, which can impact in terms of a person's muscle mass, their muscle strength, and for some people that can also impact in terms of their appetite. Symptoms of cancer such as obstructions of the gastrointestinal tract, pain, fatigue, nausea, all of these symptoms that are listed here, they are symptoms of the cancer itself and quite often a symptom of the treatments that we provide for cancer. But all of these symptoms we know can impact on a person's nutritional intake, and they are known as nutritional impact symptoms. So can cause quite a significant issue in terms of appetite and nutritional intake. So early intervention is really key. Trying to identify any changes in your weight or appetite is really important. As we know, identifying weight loss early is easier, helps us to prevent things like muscle loss and symptoms that are associated with weight loss. 5% weight loss is what we would classify as a meaningful weight loss, a clinically meaningful weight loss, which is actually quite a small amount. So if we think about a person who's 70 kilos or an old money 11 stone, that would equate to about 3 kilograms or half a stone. So it's not actually a huge amount. And that's why we really want to identify things as early as possible. So speak to your medical team if you have any concerns, request a referral to a dietitian if available. In your hospital, your medical team will be able to advise on that. If there isn't a dietitian available in your hospital, speak to your GP and see what is available in the community within the community. And if nothing is available between the hospital and community, you can look at the Irish Nutrition and Dietetics Institute website, and there's actually a tab within the website called Find a Dietitian, and they will give you information on all of the private dietitians working around Ireland. I guess since COVID, things have changed quite a lot, that there's a lot available online as well, so they don't necessarily have to be in your locality to find a dietitian. But in the meantime, I want to look at what you can do to support yourself. So as I mentioned, symptoms, when you do have symptoms, it's very hard to manage nutritional intake when we have any of these nutritional impact symptoms when they're poorly controlled. So try and work with your medical team, identifying any issues you're having. A lot of people will find with chemotherapy, for example, in the first week after treatment, they might have quite significant symptoms. So trying to get on top and manage those symptoms. With radiotherapy, it might be something that builds up throughout the treatment. But trying to manage your symptoms with your team is really, really important. Aim to eat small, frequent meals and snacks. So try and have smaller meals at breakfast, lunch and dinner, and then try and have snacks throughout the day. So something mid-morning, mid-afternoon, and a supper time snack. Aim to eat your biggest meal when you feel most hungry. So for certain people, that will be the start of the day. Other people build up towards that, as the day goes on. And then make the most of every bite. So if your portions are smaller, which can be, I guess, more helpful if you have a small appetite, try and add in extra calories and protein, and we'll look at how to do that on the next slide. Use things like nourishing drinks as snacks, things like high-protein milks, smoothies, fortified soup, using fortified milk, which we'll look at the recipe for, and work with flavors and textures that work for you. For example, if a person is experiencing fatigue, sometimes drier foods or things like salads, steaks, dry meats, it's actually a lot of work for chewing. So working with kind of sauces and kind of smoother or more mince mash kind of textures will work better. And try and avoid all dietary restrictions unless medically indicated. So avoid any diet or low-fat products and avoid any exclusion of any whole food groups. There's a really useful booklet that was developed by a dietitian in Cork, Dr. Aoife Ryan. It's called Good Nutrition for Cancer Recovery. This booklet is specifically designed for people who are experiencing issues with weight loss and loss of appetite. So the booklet has some information, which is brilliant information at the start about, eating well during treatment, but it also has about 50 recipes that are high calorie, high protein. So useful for a person or their carers to support a person going through treatment who's struggling with their nutritional intake. The Diet and Cancer booklet by the Irish Cancer Society also has a lovely section, and I know in the 2017 edition it was the very middle of the book. It was a kind of yellow colour, which is separate from the other kind of sections of the book, and they call it the build-up diet, but that's the same as a high-calorie, high-protein diet, but that also has great information on how to build up calories and protein within your diet. These are just some ways to build up your diet that I've taken from the World Cancer Research Fund booklet. Fortified milk, which you'll see kind of down in the bottom right corner here, is a really useful thing to use. So it's using a pint of full-fat milk and adding in skim milk powder into full-fat milk. It is 600 calories per pint and 40 grams of protein. So it's a really simple way, doesn't necessarily change the taste or texture of milk, but it adds in a lot of extra calories and protein. You can use it for your breakfast cereals, for making soup stocks, or ways to, various ways to kind of boost up a person's nutritional intake. And all of these suggestions are fantastic ways of adding in extra calories and protein. So then, the last few slides were very much focused on people who were experiencing weight loss or loss of appetite. So what about for people starting treatment who've not experienced either of these issues? The next few slides are really just focusing around tips for everyone really during their cancer journey. As I've mentioned, and I beat the drum a lot, self-monitor, your weight and appetite. Knowledge is power, and if you can identify any issues early on, you can work with your medical team on managing them. Speak to your oncology team if you have any concerns. Try and keep active during treatment. It can help speed up recovery after treatment, protect muscle mass and muscle strength. Exercise can help reduce or minimize fatigue associated with cancer treatment. And exercise includes things like walking, gardening, housework. It doesn't have to be more strenuous exercise, which is also great, such as cycling or going to the gym, running. You might not feel able to do exercise every day, but using the times when you can and building up maybe in smaller amounts, so 5 or 10 minute bouts, and building that up throughout the day can be helpful. Lisa's going to give obviously a much more detailed and specialist talk on this later on. Try and avoid fad diets. So there's so many misconceptions around diet and cancer. Evidence shows us this, and when I meet people in clinic, this is something I hear time and time again about exclusion of whole food groups such as dairy, carbohydrates, limiting sugars. This can lead to unnecessary stress and anxiety, and weight loss and nutritional deficiencies as well. For example, milk is a wonderful source of protein, and it's also a fantastic source of calcium. Steroids that are commonly used during cancer treatments can impact on bone health, so actually having a good source of calcium in your diet is really important and actually very protective for people during their treatment. Again, this is a talk in itself, looking at, diets and what to eat and what to avoid. But there's a really great booklet that's been developed, again, by Dr. Aoife Ryan in Cork, and it's called The Truth Behind Food and Cancer. I think it's €3 on the Breakthrough Cancer Research website, but it's a really helpful resource if you have any kind of confusion around what to eat, or if there's anything that you've heard from friends and family or read online about diet and cancer. So try and experiment with flavors. So cancer itself can lead to taste changes, and the treatments that we give can also impact in terms of a person's taste. Things like meat and water are two really common taste changes reported by people during their cancer treatment. So if plain water is difficult to drink, trying things like no added sugar squash, fruit teas, carbonated water can help, improve flavor. If certain meats become quite difficult, try and use things like marinades or other sources of protein such as eggs, lentils, dairy products, fish, etc. Try and keep yourself hydrated during treatment. So even 2% dehydration can impact on a person's ability to concentrate and energy levels. So start adding fluids in early in the day and try and have them regularly rather than letting it all kind of build up to the end of the day. It can feel a little bit overwhelming to manage 8 to 10 cups by 3 o'clock onwards. But things like water, teas, no added sugar squash, milk, all of these liquids count towards fluid requirements. And as I mentioned before, if you are experiencing symptoms associated with your cancer treatment, work with your medical team if possible. Symptoms are very common for people during their treatment and at the time of diagnosis, but there are often ways that we can help manage them. It's often hard for people to focus on diet and lifestyle factors when symptoms are poorly controlled. Within the Diet and Cancer booklet by the Irish Cancer Society, there's a lovely section on eating problems during cancer treatment, and these are all of these nutritional impact symptoms that we've looked at in that on a previous slide. This is a really useful resource in terms of looking at diet and lifestyle factors that can complement medical support for any of these symptoms. Lastly, try and have an adequate protein intake. So people with cancer actually have higher protein requirements than the general population. So an adequate protein intake is essential for preserving your muscle mass and muscle strength during treatment. Protein requirements are increased due to many different reasons, and we won't go into them all today. But we know that for people with a cancer diagnosis, the range is 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. So if you wanted to work it out for yourself, that is how we would do it. So this table I've provided here is a table from a Canadian research group, dietitians working within Alberta, but it's a really, really great resource because with being able to work out your own protein range, this will give you protein per serving, so you can work out how much protein is needed per day. So, for example, trying to have things like cereal with high-protein milk, having boiled eggs on toast for lunch, including things like meat, fish, pulses, legumes, eggs and tofu in your meals. And if you require protein in snacks, there's an excellent range of snacks available, such as high-protein yogurts, Greek yogurts, cottage cheese, a handful of nuts, hummus and crackers, etc. So this table is really helpful in terms of working out how much you need and how you can get your protein requirements. Some people with cancer find that they don't lose weight during treatment. They might even gain weight. This is particularly true for certain cohorts, such as breast cancer and prostate cancer. This can happen for a multitude of reasons as well. Psychological factors such as, what we had mentioned, stress, anxiety, depression can cause people to eat differently, change food preferences, and potentially eat emotionally, where you would eat more at times of stress. We've mentioned about decrease in physical activity. That can have an impact in terms of weight gain. Menopausal and hormonal changes can have a really big impact in terms of a person's weight gain and ability to lose weight. So parts of your anti-cancer treatment, so steroids can significantly impact in terms of a person's appetite. It can really drive up the appetite for the period that you're on steroids, which is linked to weight gain. And changes in food intake and preference. So a lot of women I'd meet with breast cancer, for example, would say the sensation in their mouth feels very different. So, raw vegetables, salads, etc., actually don't feel that nice in the mouth, whereas things that are maybe starchier or softer foods can taste much better, which can lead to changes in food preferences. Fluid retention is another thing that I've just mentioned. This isn't a true weight gain, but obviously for people with lymphedema and oedema, this can cause quite big fluctuations in terms of weight. What is advised is really focusing on weight stability. So again, during treatment, we really wouldn't encourage weight loss, just to maintain muscle mass and muscle strength, and follow the healthy eating advice on the next slides for people after cancer treatment. So next we'll look at nutritional considerations after cancer treatment. Sorry. We know adequate macro and micronutrient intake is a really important role for a person's recovery after treatment. It impacts in terms of things like muscle mass, physical function, strength, and immunity. There's convincing evidence that lifestyle factors can help reduce the risk of new cancers and also the risk of your cancer coming back. It can reduce the risk of other chronic health conditions, so not necessarily just thinking of cancer, but other things such as cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Good nutrition is really important for bone health as well after cancer treatment. But there are many barriers to eating well after a diagnosis of cancer. We know many people will experience ongoing symptoms after treatment. They don't necessarily end when treatment ends. An Irish study from 2020 found that 75% of their research group of cancer survivors continue to experience fatigue after treatment, which can have a massive impact in terms of these diet and lifestyle factors that we're looking at today. Symptoms like taste changes, dry mouth, bowel issues can all have a significant impact in terms of a person's ability to eat well, and also a person's willingness to change their diet when they have these issues ongoing. Many people report, and evidence shows us, that people with cancer find it difficult to differentiate between evidence-based nutrition advice and common myths that we see around diet and cancer. And a person's food preferences and habits may also be a barrier to eating well. And these things can be very hard to change. They're hard to change within the general population, and that's no different for anyone who's experienced cancer treatment. So what is advised for people who have completed treatment? The most reliable information that we have from all scientific studies have been kind of developed into expert reports, and they've been published by the World Cancer Research Fund and the American Institute of Cancer Research. These reports are endorsed by the World Health Organization and have many other international organizations. So they're generally developed by a panel of experts who review scientific evidence from hundreds of thousands of studies. When we look at cancer survivorship, there's obviously many factors that we cannot change, such as genetics, age, specific details about a cancer type or its location. Therefore, what we want to look at is modifiable health factors that can positively impact in terms of a risk of recurrence. Studies have shown higher rates of smoking and alcohol intake can have a negative impact on health, whereas higher rates of physical activity, being a healthy body weight, having a healthy diet can have a positive impact in terms of risk of recurrence and a lower risk of mortality from cancer and also other diseases such as heart disease. For people who have completed their cancer treatment, it's advised that you follow the same recommendations advised for cancer prevention. It's thought that these mechanisms that promote cancer prevention also promote the prevention of recurrence. So we'll start and we'll kind of work through the ones that are relevant today. The one we'll leave out is breastfeeding for now. So being as lean as possible within a healthy body weight is is the first recommendation from the World Cancer Research Fund. There's strong evidence that greater body fatness increases the risk of developing a number of cancers, so 13 different cancers. It's also thought that we know that it also increases your risk of diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and being a healthy weight is also associated with a reduced risk of cancer recurrence. So an example of this would be the WIN study, which is a large-scale dietary intervention trial in early-stage breast cancer, and it was successful in showing within the intervention group, when women were able to lose weight, that it was there was indications for lower risk of cancer recurrence. Body fatness can be quite difficult to measure without special equipment, but there are calculations or estimations that we can use for it. So BMI is commonly used for estimating body fatness based on your weight and height. So how you would do it is using your your weight in kilograms divided by your height squared, and it's divided up into various categories. Where fat is stored is also important within the body, so storing fat around the abdomen or the belly is commonly referred to as apple shape. And excess fat around the central part of the body is associated with a number of other chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. So waist measurement is another way of checking your body's fat distribution. So this would be really looking at between the top hip bone and your lower rib, and it's the middle point, which tends to be really your belly button, and that's a way. So there are different scales for men and women, so finding the right, but you'd find this on the CRE website, or British Heart Foundation have information on this. The next is physical activity, so try and be physically active. We know physical activity is important for all cancer patients at all stages of the cancer journey. If we focus, this is taken from the Macmillan Evidence Review of physical activity, but we know, and this is specifically to the post-treatment stage, but we know exercise significantly improves fitness when they look at pooling 14 randomized control trials, so RCTs are randomized control trials, which is a really good quality of evidence. It's also associated with lower rates of fatigue, improvements in terms of quality of life, lower scores of depression and anxiety, a reduction in terms of body fatness, and increase in muscle mass. When we look at the risk of recurrence, women who are meeting 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week, which is the recommended exercise level for the general population, there is a 40% lower risk of breast cancer specific mortality and breast cancer recurrence compared to women who are meeting less than an hour a week. In terms of colorectal cancer, cancer mortality was reduced by 50% when performing 6 hours of physical activity per week. And in terms of prostate cancer, there was a lower risk in terms of prostate-specific mortality by 30% and disease progression by nearly 57% with 3 hours of moderate intensity exercise per week. This can be things like walking, and when we think about moderate intensity, it would be if you were walking with a friend and you were slightly puffed when you're walking, but you're still able to hold a conversation. That's kind of the level that we're thinking about. But again, Lisa will be much better at speaking about that this afternoon. Going back to diet then, the third recommendation is eating a predominantly plant-based diet. Plant food should make up the majority of our diet, so approximately 75% of it. Plant-based foods includes fruit and vegetables, whole grains, potatoes, legumes, pulses, nuts and seeds. The remaining 25% of our diet should come from animal sources such as dairy, eggs, fish and meat. There's strong evidence that a diet rich in plant-based sources protects us from many forms of cancer, and that eating foods containing dietary fiber protects against weight gain and obesity. For example, one of the World Cancer Research Fund studies on all studies really available on bowel cancer risk and fibre found that for every 10 grams of fibre eaten per day, there's a 10% lower risk of developing bowel cancer. There's strong evidence that eating non-starchy vegetables, so that's really any vegetable that isn't a potato, yam or sweet potato, can protect against mouth cancer and throat cancer. Higher fruit consumption is protective against cancers of the mouth, throat, and lungs. Fruits and vegetables are rich in vitamins, minerals, and keep our immune system and body really healthy. They also provide us with antioxidants and phytochemicals, which are plant-based chemicals. These are active compounds that can help protect against cancer. As a rule of thumb, with fruits and vegetables, aim to eat the rainbow, as variety of fruit and vegetable colours means you get a range of phytonutrients, pigments, and antioxidants, which all have different health benefits. So in general, what we would say is try and eat more of what is in the yellow column, so your whole grain fruit and vegetables, brown pastas, brown rice, basmati, whole grain couscous, potatoes with the skins on, increases the fibre, things like your whole grain cereals or pulses, legumes, all of these things are very protective, and try and limit what we see in the orange column. It doesn't mean that they have to be totally avoided, but just try and limit these within the diet. They tend to provide less nutrients, what we would see in the orange column. So you would have lower amounts of fibre and vitamin and minerals within the orange column. So eating more of what we see in the yellow column would give you more of these. Try and limit fast foods and processed foods. So generally we know fast foods tend to be higher in salt, sugar, saturated fats, and trans fats. And there's strong evidence that these foods are associated with excess weight gain and result in overweight and obesity. In terms of then the fifth recommendation is limiting red meat and processed meat. So people who eat red meat are advised to limit the intake of red meat to 350 to 500 grams of red meat per week. So if we think about how you do that, one of the Tetra Paks of mints is 500 grams, the kind of the smallest size of the Tetra Paks. So that would be, it's still quite a large amount of red meat per week, but would generally equate to 2 to 3 portions. Red meat includes beef, pork, veal, venison, lamb, mutton, and it's a really valuable source of nutrients. It's not something that has to be avoided. It includes nutrients like iron, vitamin B12, zinc, and protein. So if you like it, it's absolutely fine to have, but try and have it within that kind of portioned amount. It is advised, however, to avoid processed meats. So processed meats would be things like your sliced meats, charcuterie, sausages, rashers, pudding, your general kind of fry-up. There is strong evidence that eating too much processed meats can cause bowel cancer and stomach cancer and might be related to pancreatic cancer. So it has been classified as what we call a group 1 carcinogen, meaning it's likely that it is cancer-causing. White meats, however, are neither increased nor decreased cancer risks, so they're neutral and a really good source of protein within the diet, and fish has actually been shown to be protective within the diet. So if we're thinking about then alternatives, protein alternatives to red meat and processed meat, try replace red meats with beans and lentils in stews and casseroles, making things like fish cakes or chicken burgers rather than beef or pork burgers. And within fry-ups, replacing sausages, rashers, puddings, etc. with things like eggs, mushrooms, tomatoes, baked beans. Use things like tinned fish, hummus, chicken, roast veg, etc. in sandwiches rather than sliced meats. The sixth recommendation is trying to limit sugar-containing drinks. So there's convincing evidence that the consumption of sugar-sweetened drinks causes weight gain and obesity in both children and adults. So these include all of these drinks that are listed here. We have a lot of hidden sugars in our diet. So it's very easy to underestimate the amount of sugar that we have in our diet. It's recommended for a person who's a healthy adult weight has about 30 grams of sugar in their diet. And generally, from evidence, we know that people tend to have double this, about 59 grams of sugar. And that would come from things like sugar-sweetened drinks, biscuits, cakes, jams, alcohols, and milk products. So limiting sugar-sweetened drinks is one way that we can help reduce really excess weight gain within the population. And then the last point second last point that they mention is limiting alcohol. So the International Agency on Research for Cancer classified alcohol as a group 1 carcinogen, meaning that there's convincing evidence that there is an association with cancer. Therefore, the World Cancer Research Fund recommends not drinking alcohol for cancer prevention and reducing cancer risk. We know it's a big part of our culture in Ireland, so what we would say is, if you do drink alcohol, then try and, stick with the national guidance, which for women, I've gone very gendered here and did pink for women and blue for men, but 11 standard units of alcohol for women and 17 standard units of alcohol for men. There's many ways that alcohol can increase cancer risk, and we don't fully understand them all yet, but one potential way is weight control. So we know that alcoholic drinks can be quite calorific. So there's ways that you can work around it. So you can choose low alcohol with lower alcohol intake or alcohol levels. So things like lower strength beers and wines, making spritzers or shandies with your drink as well to make it go a little bit further. And then lastly, do not use cancer supplements for cancer prevention. There are times in our lives where we are advised to take supplements. For example, women of childbearing age will be advised to take folic acid. And we'll look at some examples of exceptions in a minute. But for most people, the consumption of the right food and drink is likely to prevent against cancer. It's more likely to prevent against cancer than a supplement. So we know that having a healthy, balanced diet, you can meet most of your vitamin and mineral needs through diet alone, and it will also provide you with a whole other range of nutrients from eating foods rather than the specific ones that you would get within a pill. As I mentioned, there are exceptions, so really anyone over the age of 65 should be taking a vitamin D supplementation, or a vitamin D supplement. So anyone over the age of 65, anyone with darker skin, if you're housebound, if you cover your skin for cultural reasons, we would advise taking a vitamin D supplement of 15 to 20 micrograms. And then for the general population, anyone under 65, you are advised to take 10 grams of vitamin D from September to May, just because of where we live. We make vitamin D from our skin, we get it from daylight, and we don't get a lot of that from September to May, or enough of high levels that will help us actually synthesize vitamin D. So lastly, I just wanted to finish up with some of the websites that I think are really helpful. Breakthrough Cancer Research website I've mentioned a few times today. They have really fantastic booklets. There's one obviously for people who need a high calorie, high protein diet. There's that really helpful booklet around common misconceptions around diet and cancer. And there is also one for people after cancer treatment around survivorship and healthy eating recipes. The Irish Cancer Society have a wonderful booklet that really covers all stages of the cancer journey, and have great information online. The World Cancer Research Fund has a great blog. You can search, there's a search function, and there's a huge amount of research on there, or information on there, and really fantastic resources about these expert reports that I've mentioned. The Memorial Sloan Kettering website, they're a cancer center in New York, but they have a really interesting section. It's called About Herbs, and that's if you've heard of some, if anyone mentions to you, you've read about any, something like turmeric, for example, and the benefits of turmeric or curcumin, that you can basically search these sorts of things and it will give you the evidence behind it. And it's a really useful function. I use it a lot when I hear of weird and wonderful things that patients might be taking or have been advised to take, and if I haven't heard of it yet, I can print off information from there. So it's a really helpful tool if you want to have a look through the evidence behind something. The World Cancer Research Fund has a really wonderful section on diet and cancer as well, and really interesting information in their blog. And as I mentioned, the Irish Nutrition and Dietetics Institute, there's the section on finding a dietitian, and there's also fact sheets around cancer treatment as well. So thank you for listening today, and I'm happy to take any questions. Hi, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you, Veronica. That was a really educational talk, and I think we all took a lot from it. Any questions in the room or online is welcome.
This lady here.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned a lot about dairy for the bones and calcium and all that.
Yeah.
Now, what about Professor Jane Plant when she did the China study? So I have breast cancer and I went off dairy.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to see, how would you replace it now? I do take calcium supplements. But it's always with the dietitians, they mention plenty of dairy.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Or?
Yeah, I think Professor Plant's study has changed a lot of, like, I always hear back when it comes to dairy and cancer. This is always the book that I think people are referring to. There's a lot of flaws in the China study. So the way, the type of research that it focuses on, it's not actually great quality evidence that is used. So things like, this is a study that's based in China. It looked at 2 cohorts, but it didn't really look at any of the what we call confounding factors around the people who live in those areas. So things like the foods they eat, the industrialization around the area, so other factors that might impact in terms of cancer intake. And it basically said, this group have a low intake of dairy, this group have a high intake of dairy, therefore the group with the high intake of dairy the dairy must be causing cancer. That's how the kind of study looked at it. But the quality, they didn't look at these kind of confounding factors, these other environmental factors that might impact in terms of cancer development and cancer risk. So basically, the World Cancer Research Fund has done enormous research. They will look at all of the evidence that is available worldwide, collate it, and actually dairy has been found to be protective for postmenopausal breast cancer and colorectal cancer. So there's no evidence from any of their studies. How the World Cancer Research Fund would look at studies is they break it down per tumour type or cancer. It's very specific, and there's been no evidence to show within their research that dairy causes an increased risk of cancer. And for some cancers, it's actually protective, as I've mentioned.
Just one other question. What's your opinion on soya? Is they eat a lot of soya?
Yes. So again, when we look at evidence from the World Cancer Research Fund, there was a concern around soy maybe 10 years ago around the idea of, so the question was just around the risk of soy and cancer, and is there an association or risk with it. What they found through the evidence was, or what I guess the issue or the concern was around phytoestrogens or plant-based estrogens, and would this cause a person who has an estrogen-dependent cancer, would that cause, an increase in terms of their cancer progression or development? From evidence, it doesn't seem like there is any association between soy and cancer risk. And if anything, soy-based products are actually really useful in terms of the fibre that they provide. They're really helpful in terms of heart health, so it helps reduce things like your absorption of cholesterol in the gut, the types of fibre that you would get from tofu or edamame beans or tempeh, that is actually protective for heart health, and there's no issues in terms of having it in terms of cancer risk. Yeah.
Thank you, Veronica. We just have time for one more question, unfortunately, so I'm going to hand over to this list.
Hello. I had colorectal cancer twice, and the recommendation, because I have a stoma, is that I'd eat small but frequently.
Yes.
And what I'm finding is that I get hungry very quick, but I'm evidently taking the wrong diet. Is there foods that you could take? Because snacking in Ireland, it's the wrong snack. Is there foods that could that I wouldn't be hungry within an hour? Is there small meals I could have that you could recommend, please?
Yeah, so I guess if we look at the types of nutrients that we have, so macronutrients, so that would be your proteins, carbohydrates, fats. Protein, we know, is the most satiating or filling nutrient, okay? So trying to have protein within your snacks so there's evidence showing that, for example, if you have protein in your breakfast in the morning, a good source of protein, that your intake can be reduced by 400 calories throughout the day. So having protein within each meal is definitely a beneficial thing in terms of helping with appetite regulation. Is that okay? So when we think about protein, sorry, I should explain what that is. Things like meat, fish, eggs, Dairy products are all kind of good quality sources of protein. Things like, did you say you have to keep fibre to a minimum? Okay, so small meals. So things like for you maybe beans on toast, egg on toast, having a sandwich with hummus in it, having chicken, having fish within it. They're all good sources of protein that you could have throughout the day that should help keep you fuller for longer. Fibre is also very filling, so having your whole grains, having your fruits and vegetables as well, they help bulk up a meal and should help keep you feeling fuller for longer because they basically take longer to break down in the stomach. Okay.
Thank you very much, Veronica.
Thanks.
We'll give her
Thank
all a
you all
round of
for
applause,
listening.
please. Thank you.
Thanks.